Hello and welcome to Assetto Corsa EVO 0.6. Free roam has not been added to the game, the career mode is not back. However, they have added 6 new cars, 3 of which being GT3, 1 is a GT4, and we have 2 old cars added. We also have the Sebring International Raceway that has been added to the game. For me, I think the big story is this Ford Mustang GT3. It is a nice, fun car to drive. The real true big story, I think, is that they've improved the suspension modeling in the game. The vehicles handle a lot better now than they did previously, so I think the updates they did to suspension is the real true story of this update. They've also made some changes to the menus, so we have quite a lot to talk about. Going over the cars real quick, we have the Audi R8 GT4. It is okay to drive. I'm curious how it compares to the Cayman GT4. We have the Ferrari 296 GT3. It feels like a precise, no-nonsense instrument of speed. We have the Ford Mustang GT3, which is a very fun, lively car. The front feels really nice on the turn-in, and the rear end can kick out a little bit on throttle. It is a fun car compared to the Ferrari. Then we have the Porsche 911 GT3 R Rennsport, which is kind of a combination of both. It's an instrument of speed, sure, whatever. It's very serious, but it also has a bit of a playful nature to it in how the rear of it slides under acceleration. As far as the older cars added, we have the Ferrari GTO, which has no ABS and the brakes are pretty bad. It is a more exciting, more challenging car to drive out of the two. The other car that they added was the Lamborghini Countach, which feels less special, more boring, however more consistent, more approachable, and easier to drive. And the track that was added was the Sebring International Raceway. Basically, it is a very flat circuit here in America. A lot of the track is basically straightaways or glorified straightaways that are like a slight turn where you, all right, it's a straightaway, but I'm turning my wheel a little bit. Like, maybe that's fun in real life when your body is feeling the G-forces, but in a game, it's like you have straightaways and then you have glorified straightaways. But at the end of every straightaway is a 90-degree corner. So you really need to nail the braking zones correctly, rotate the car around through the corner, and then accelerate to the next straightaway. So this seems like a very good track if you are trying to practice your braking, or if you're trying to practice how to approach 90-degree corners. In general, I find the track layout to be decent. It's fun to drive. Overall, the terrain being so flat is a little bit boring, but the layout of the track is pretty decent, and I do find it to be fun to drive on. I'm sure that the developers did a really good job of making sure everything is accurate and everything's correct, but I'm mainly only focused on what does it feel like to drive. And what it feels like to drive is it's very flat, a little bit boring, but the layout is fun with the straightaways into the 90-degree corners. The 90-degree corners are usually always keeping you on your toes and keeping you focused on not blowing the braking zone and making sure that you approach the next corner correctly. That being said, the final turn of the track is, in my opinion, horrible because there are lines on the ground that you have to follow. So if you do the turn in the way that I perceive as like the fastest way through the corner, you actually drive over the track limits. So I find that to be pretty annoying, but if you respect the lines that are drawn on the ground, then you can stay within the track limits. Let's hop into the vehicle hub and show you guys the differences here. So here everything's still pretty standard, but once you get to this menu, you will notice things are very different. So the good thing about this is you can finally know more clearly information about the cars. So for example, this Ford Mustang, it is a rear-wheel drive front-engine car. Great. What's this Audi? Oh, this Audi is an all-wheel drive front-engine car, and it's turbocharged. Interesting, that's good to know. So it is interesting and good that the information of the vehicles is finally presented. For example, with these Lamborghinis, you'd think to yourself, oh, Lamborghini, all-wheel drive, right? You click on it, no. This is a rear-wheel drive mid-engine car, so you think, oh, I thought Lamborghinis are supposed to be all-wheel drive. This is so funny. Well, now you can know for sure. My only complaint with this is it only displays the vehicle that you have selected. So like if I hover over the Lotus, it's not going to update over here for the information of the Lotus. I have to click it in order to see what it is and then go back. Click it, see what it is, and then go back. So that's not so great. Now, there's a search vehicle function, but I have a criticism about this. I really wish we had the old search function from the original Assetto Corsa game. So for example, I'm going to type GT3, hit enter. Wow, great. I have all the cars where it has GT3 in the title of the car. So we have the BMW, the new Ferrari, the new Mustang, the old GT3 Porsche Cup car, the new GT3 R Rennsport, and then the road-going GT3 RS, which is not a race car, but it is a road car. So, okay, this is helpful, but what if I type in, let's say, all-wheel drive? Nothing comes up. So I'm not able to filter by drivetrain. And then we have these filters up here at the top, which is for road, track, racing, modern, young timer. We have vintage, correct combustion, garbage, and then hybrid. So if you want to filter cars by through that method, you can absolutely do that. Before we move on to the next topic, I want to show you guys what the ancient forgotten technology from the original Assetto Corsa looked like. So we're going to click on our car here to bring up the brands. From here, we're going to hit all, and this will bring us to this menu where we're able to filter by brand or filter by tag. Tag is a lot more important for me in terms of what I'm talking about. So for example, previously I wrote GT3 and I got a bunch of GT3 cars. So if you just click here on this GT3 tab, it will show you every GT3 car that's actually in the GT3 category, not, for example, the 911 GT3 RS, which is a road car that's not in the GT3 category, but it has GT3 in the name. But more importantly, this next one. Look what happens when I select all-wheel drive, which I'm not able to do in Assetto Corsa EVO. It gives me all of the cars in the game that are all-wheel drive. Why can't I have this in Assetto Corsa EVO? So I really wish they would implement a tags system like this. I don't really think we need like a rotary tab. Like, wow, there's only one car here in the rotary tab. Interesting. But like show me American cars. Okay, cool. These are all the American cars in the game. All right, I feel like front wheel drive. Show me all the front wheel drive cars in the game. This is the kind of tag system I want in Assetto Corsa EVO. All of the 9 tags where it's like, oh, road, track, racing, modern, young timer, vintage, internal combustion, electric, or hybrid. All of those tags can just be included here. And another one that's really big is the transmission one. So like we could go for, show me all the cars that have a sequential transmission. Great. Show me all the cars that are just straight up manual with a stick. Great. I really wish we had this kind of a tag system in AC EVO. I don't see any reason why not to have it. I feel as the roster of cars grows and continues to get larger, this would just be a benefit for everybody. Anyways, I just wanted to show you guys this forgotten, ancient, forbidden technology from years and years and years ago that developers have forgotten is possible. All right, back to the new game, back to Assetto Corsa EVO. The one thing that was lost when they changed to this that makes me really sad is previously when you looked at the vehicles that are like your vehicles, it would show you the mileage that you've put on them. The mileage in kilometers. What the hell is a kilometer? Anyways, so it would show you your mileage so you could see which cars you were driving the most. Now that's gone. For the longest time, one of the things that I've always wanted from driving games is I want the vehicles to have a working odometer. This was present in Need for Speed Shift and Need for Speed Shift 2 Unleashed. However, not a lot of other games have working odometers. And I really wish that they did so that you could visually see how much you've driven your car. And previously, it would display it in in text when you're selecting which car you wanted to use. Now that's gone. That's no longer there. And if it's somewhere hidden, then I haven't found it. I don't know. But my understanding is I think it's gone. All right, so with all that talking, I think it's time to do some driving. We're gonna first we're gonna look at the cars and then we're gonna look at the track. So let's go ahead and see what's up with our cars. We're gonna be starting with the Audi GT4, which compares to the Cayman. So GT4. So we have the Audi R8, which is 15.9, and we have the Cayman, which is 15.6. So presumably the Audi should be faster than the Cayman if we look at these performance ratings. But they should be close enough that they can still compete, right? Well, let's go find out. All right, so the track that we're going to be driving on is going to be the Nurburgring GP Strecke. I think this is going to be my testing track going forward. I've driven a lot of tracks recently, and I've been thinking about which ones are my favorite to drive. This ended up being one of my favorite tracks in the game, so I think this is going to be my testing track. Alright, the Audi R8 GT4. This does have a higher performance rating than the Porsche Cayman GT4, and that comes from its V10 engine. It sounds wonderful and it produces more power than the Cayman GT4. That being said, both cars are very well balanced, neutral, good feeling mid-engine cars. The difference between the GT4 Audi R8 and the GT4 Porsche Cayman is, one, the interior feels more claustrophobic. You have this little like hat thing over your gauge cluster, and sometimes that blocks forward visibility. Also, the A-pillar is pretty close to the center of your screen, so you feel like the A-pillar is constantly there close to you. When I was driving the Audi just by itself, I didn't notice this as being that big of an issue. However, when you drive the Audi and the Porsche back to back, you'll notice immediately that in the Cayman, your forward visibility is a lot better. And the difference there is I noticed with the Cayman, I had a lot more confidence in how I was placing the car on the road and how I was positioning it as I was moving it, because I had better forward visibility, giving me more confidence in positioning. So as far as I can tell, that's really the two differences between both of these GT4 cars. The Audi has more power because of its engine, which gives it the higher performance rating. However, the interior is more claustrophobic with the little hat on the gauge cluster that blocks your forward visibility, and the A-pillar being closer to center, giving a more claustrophobic feeling. For myself personally, I much rather prefer the Porsche Cayman GT4. I like the forward visibility, even if it means having slightly less horsepower. Alright, before we go check out the Porsche's lap, take a look at the difference here in terms of visibility between the Audi and the Porsche. You'll see very quickly what I mean by the Audi feels claustrophobic and the Porsche is a lot more open feeling. Alright, hopping into our Porsche Cayman GT4, the other GT4 car that we have in the game. This is not a new car that they've added, however I thought it would be very interesting to have a comparison between the brand new Audi R8 GT4 and the already existing Porsche Cayman GT4. The two big differences that I see is that with the Cayman, the forward visibility is much better, and that gives you as a driver a lot more confidence in visualizing how you want to place the car. Having the ability to see the apexes more clearly and visualize the line you want to take, this is the kind of stuff that makes me more confident as a driver in the Cayman versus the Audi. So for me personally as a driver, I prefer the Porsche Cayman GT4. However, the Audi R8 does have a higher performance rating of 15.9 versus the Cayman, which is 15.6. And that is reflected in the lap time. I got about a 0.4 of a second slower lap time with the Cayman, but from a driver's perspective, I prefer picking the Cayman because of the forward visibility and the confidence that it gives you as a driver. I would pick the Porsche Cayman probably 9 times out of 10. So you can't go wrong with either of them, it's just I have a small preference towards the Porsche Cayman. Still though, both cars are excellent, and it'll be interesting to see if they add any more GT4 cars to this category. Alright, so the results that I got with very limited laps is the Audi GT4 came in at about 2 minutes 4 seconds .065. The Porsche Cayman GT4 came in at 2 minutes 4 seconds .461. So the difference in the performance rating seems to be justified. However, it'll be very interesting to see what people can do with these cars when they put in a lot more laps, like 10, 20, 30, 100 laps. It'll be very interesting to see what the differences are when these cars are like fully maximized. The Ferrari 296 GT3. This is the most serious, purpose-built feeling GT3 car that they added. All of the GT3 cars feel great, however this one feels the most serious. It feels like it's here to do a mission, and that is being the best and fastest GT3 car in the game, and I think that is reflected in its performance value of 22.3. The next highest is the BMW at 21.7, then the Porsche GT3 Rennsport at 20.4, and the Ford Mustang at 19.4. In general, the Ferrari feels serious, not really that fun, not really that playful. The way you extract fun from this vehicle is by placing it into positions that the other cars would struggle to get to and following lines that the other cars, the heavier car like the Ford Mustang for example, would struggle to follow. The Ferrari has this nimbleness and lightness that gives you a feeling that you can place it where you want and you can take the lines you want. Additionally, the way the engine sounds while you're shifting is very pleasing with the turbo sounds. In general, this car is very serious, very competent, and it's not the most fun. It's more like the clinical instrument of speed. Alright, so the car that I am most excited about that they added in this update is the Ford Mustang GT3, a big, burly, strong, American V8. This car is not as razor sharp as the Ferrari GT3, however, it is more fun to drive. The turn-in is still very nice and good feeling, however, the throttle application is where this vehicle feels a bit more fun. When you're applying throttle, the rear end really wants to rotate and gives you a very fun feeling where you're controlling the front and you're having the rear slide and you're catching the rear and you're pulling it through the track. Every single corner seems like a fun event. Dynamically, this is a car that feels heavier than the other cars in the category. It's most comparable to the BMW because they are both front-engine rear-wheel drive cars. However, even compared to the BMW, the Mustang does feel heavier. So dynamically, it feels heavy. It feels the least focused, the most sloppy, but it is still a high-performing GT3 car that is well-balanced, has good aero. This is a lot more of a fun car, but a lot less competent. That being said, however, this is the vehicle that I think I'm most excited that they added with this recent update. So if you're looking for a fun pick in the GT3 category, the Ford Mustang would be the winner, I think, for the fun pick. However, its lack of sharpness, I think, is reflected in its performance rating, which is 19.4, which is below every other car in this category. Like the Ferrari, the BMW, and the Porsche are all in the 20s, and the Mustang is the only one that's below 20. So lowest performance rating, most fun. Genuinely speaking, I'm not that much of a Ford enjoyer. I'm not a Ford enthusiast, but this is a fun car. So if you guys are interested, I would say give it a drive. Hopping into the Porsche 911 GT3 R Rennsport, there are two versions of this. There is the GT3 version, and then there is the unrestricted version. However, both of them have the performance rating of 20.4. And when I did lap testing on both of them without recording, I got the same lap times for both of them. So maybe this is something that they'll need to update in the future, or maybe this is correct. I'm not 100% sure, but both of them have the same performance rating. So for the purpose of comparing it to the other cars, I chose the GT3 version, not the unrestricted version. That being said, what is this Porsche 911 GT3 like? This is the combination of fun and precision. This car does feel very precise like the Ferrari. It is not as precise. The rear engine, well, rear mid-engine layout of the 911, it gives you that signature light, delicate feeling in the front, but also that fun playfulness slide weight management in the rear. For me personally, I think this is the sweet spot. It doesn't feel too serious to the point where it's not fun. It's not so much fun that it loses an element of precision or balance. This to me is the pick if you want fun, performance, and balance. Well, that just sums up the typical 911 now, doesn't it? That being said, this is a highly competent, precision, nimble, lightweight feeling, fun in the rear, nice to catch it in corners, just great feeling GT3 car. This would probably be my pick if I had to drive for a very long time. If I had a race that was like, let's say 20-30 laps, I would want to have this car because not only would it give me the precision that I'm looking for, it would give me an element of fun where I wouldn't dread the next lap. Every lap would be like a fun lap. So for me, this would be more of a long kind of endurance race car where I would enjoy it because of the variety of precision and fun. All right, so the Porsche. So this next car is not a new car that was added. However, since we're looking at the GT3 category, I thought it would be interesting to look at the BMW M4 GT3. This for me was probably the most frustrating car out of the four that I drove. I really dislike the sound of the traction control. It's kind of, it bothers me. And this is a car that, to me, it feels the most bland. It's not fun like the Mustang. It's not precise like the Ferrari. Yes, it can perform. Yes, it's a GT3. As far as the performance rating goes, it should be the second best GT3. However, my experience driving it is I was very frustrated. I don't like the dynamics of it, and I really dislike the sound of the traction control coming on where it's like, why do I need to hear that? Anyways, yeah, I don't know. I feel like every video I do, I just become more and more of a BMW hater. Sorry to all the BMW fans out there. BMW used to make good cars, I know. But yeah, to me, this car just feels very bland, feels very average. It should be one of the more higher performing GT3s, but in order to get that higher performance, I feel like you have to deal with a certain element of frustration because the car doesn't feel super precise and it doesn't feel particularly fun. However, if you're a BMW fan, maybe you'll really enjoy this car, so to each their own. However, I thought it would be interesting to compare it since 3 of the new cars are GT3s, and then this is technically the 4th GT3. As far as cars that I didn't cover the Porsche 911 GT3 Cup in the 992. I didn't cover the Cup car because the GT3 R Rennsport is new and I feel like it's relatively similar. Also, the Cup car has a performance rating of 17.3, so it's even worse. It's an even lower rating than the Ford Mustang, which is the 19.4. So I'm not even really sure if the GT3 Cup is supposed to compete with these other GT3s. So I defaulted to the 911 GT3 R Rennsport. Alright, so as far as my GT3 results, the Ferrari 296 GT3 was the fastest with 1 minute 58 seconds, .677. Next fastest for me was the Porsche 911 GT3 R because I am a lot more comfortable with it. I got a 159.518. Third place for me was the BMW M4, which technically has a higher performance rating, so it should be in second place. I found driving this vehicle to be frustrating, so it could just be user error, Anyways, with the BMW, I got a 159.550. And the Ford Mustang was the slowest GT3, which has also the lowest performance rating, so it makes sense, with 2 minutes.488. This seems to be a pretty decent spread for GT3 vehicles. The Ferrari seems to be the overachiever. The Mustang seems to be the one in last place, with the BMW and the Porsche being both very similar. That being said, these times were done with a limited amount of laps, so with more laps I would have better results. It'll be very interesting to see what people do with these cars in the community when they get 10, 20, 30, 100 laps down and really maximize the performance that these cars are capable of. That's going to be very interesting to see. All right, the Ferrari 288 GTO. This is a very different experience compared to the GT3s that we've been driving. This is an older car that makes everything difficult. This car doesn't want to brake, this car doesn't want to turn, it doesn't want to grip, it doesn't want to accelerate, it doesn't want to shift gears. This car is a constant uphill battle in every possible direction. That being said, it does feel very special. It does feel very challenging. If you're looking for, I think, the most difficult car in the game, this is probably it. I haven't tested every single car in the game, but I have not driven a car that has been more challenging or difficult than this car. Just making a clean lap was a challenge. I saw Misha, the Nurburgring YouTuber, talking about doing a challenge of driving this car around the Nurburgring as fast as possible. That sounds horrible. I'm almost willing to try it. This car is... The experience of driving this car was such an incredible challenge. It was horrible, and it was rewarding, and it was fun, and part of me even wants to do it again because I feel like I've gotten better as a driver driving this car because it's so challenging, and it does... I feel like with this car, you have to know every single turn specific to how the car is going to react, because there's so many situations where you're approaching a turn and you hit the brakes like 0.1 second too late and that's it. You're off the track. You hit your brakes 0.1 second too late, it's over. And so this was a very challenging car to drive, and the thing about it is it really rewards you for being smooth with everything. You want to be smooth on accelerating, you want to be smooth on braking, you want to be smooth when you're turning in. This car rewards smoothness, and I wish I had a clutch pedal in my setup for this kind of a car, because switching gears in a sequential style with this car is a disaster. So this is definitely a car where like an H pattern would be great and a clutch pedal would be great, and if you don't have those things, that's just another uphill thing to battle. Man, this car really was something crazy and special to drive in an awful way, but I also want to do it again. All right, that's gonna be it. 222.8. Man, this is a frustrating car. All right, hopping into a car that feels way more normal. The Lamborghini Countach. That's a sentence no one has ever said in history. However, the Lamborghini Countach compared to the Ferrari 288 GTO feels so much more approachable, consistent, user-friendly. It's like, it's still that old car charm of it doesn't have ABS, you need to be a little bit more careful, but it's easier to shift gears, it's easier to slow down, it's easier to accelerate. The accelerating doesn't feel as dangerous, it doesn't feel as dramatic because you have the ability to actually slow down and stop. This is just a really pleasant car. After driving the Ferrari, you could forget that the Countach was something crazy and special, because in comparison, back to back, it really feels very tame. It feels like a very tame, calm, almost regular car, but it's not. Still a very enjoyable older car to drive. I had a great time driving the Lamborghini Countach, and that wraps up all of the vehicles that we are going to be covering in this video. Alrighty, now that we're done with the vehicle portion of the video, let's talk about the new racetrack that they added, which is Sebring International Raceways in North America. I am here in my Porsche 911 GT3 RS. We're gonna go for a fast lap and talk about the track. So we start out with a pretty long straightaway that turns into an almost deceptive double apex corner. The important thing to notice is the wall is not what you're aiming at because the track is like halfway in the middle of the pavement. This is a brake zone that goes into a couple of S-shaped turns, which this is a tightening turn, so you'll need to slow down a little bit more in order to get it right. From here, it is just a basically glorified straightaway as we turn our steering wheel a little bit. More and more, I found myself appreciating this corner because it was very fun to just slam on the brakes, dive in, and hook it around the apex. Another long, glorified straightaway here. However, this is another heavy braking zone into a nice 90-degree turn with a beautiful view of the American flag over there. Isn't that just lovely? Another glorified straightaway as we take this little bit of an edge here on the track as we line up for the next one. And this will be another straightaway. As I was learning this track more and more, I saw that the track was very flat and there was a few corners that were a dangerous spot. Like this was one of them. And then our last big corner before the straightaway. This part's really boring as nothing is happening. This is like the really, really boring straightaway. Now this corner, I really hate this corner because the way it's on the ground is different than the way that I would actually drive it. So I guess the area on the ground that is usable is like runoff zone. However, see, even right there, I do go over the track limit, but I do it in a way where it doesn't invalidate my lap time. But yeah, so we ended up with about 2:12 on our lap with our GT3 RS. Alright, and that'll do it. Thank you guys very much for watching. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you're enjoying the game, and I will see you next time. Alright, have fun. So I'll catch you guys later. Bye-bye.